All right. Happy Monday.
Happy
Somebody
Monday.
say happy Monday back would be awesome.
Happy Monday back.
Interesting weekend in sports for Atlanta. You know, the Braves got eliminated, but the Falcons decided to play, and now the Hawks, I think they start on Wednesday. So as the season turns, so does sports. All right. So my co-host, Miss Kelly Chancy, I see you on here. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing good. Well, let's jump in. We've
Awesome.
got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Let me get my screen up here. My DJ skills are over for the day. All right. Fulton County, 788 active listings. You know, I like to look kind of across. I don't feel like that number's really changed in the last 60 days. I mean, it goes up and it goes down, but it looks pretty consistent as far as like active inventory holding in Fulton County. What I do see is this number changing a little bit. If you go backwards and look across, 60 days ago, we were putting about 145 houses under contract a week. There were a couple lower weeks in there, and then it went down to about 130 something a week. Then it went down to low 120 a week, and now we broken under 100 for the first time under active option. Pendings, though, if you're looking back across on the pendings, same kind of story. We were 350, 300, went down into the 200. We were high 200s here. And now we're having a week where we're low 200. So it's worthy of noting. What does that mean? Could I say that's exactly a slowdown? My intuition and my expertise says yes. But once again, 1 week is never a trend. You got to have a couple weeks to really show a trend. But the last number, obviously, I like to highlight, and Kelly, jump in anytime, is this closings. Same deal. We were kind of holding here, and closings bounce around a whole lot more than under contracts do. But 370, 270, 350, 250, like up, down, 230, 315, 335, we're at 323. So
Yeah.
in the middle of October, yeah.
I like to look like middle of October versus middle, and you kind of just go past like middle of October versus middle of September versus middle of August, you know, because some people still are very traditional and think you need to close at the end of the month. So that's what, to me, the real comparison, you know. So like 9/19 was 315, we're 272, because you can't really count Labor Day weekend. That usually shifts things a little bit because people are still off that Tuesday, you know, after Monday and so forth. And then same thing with but you know, and August is always a seasonally slower month because that's the month most school systems start. So you're either in your house like June, July. You kind of take that month of August to go meet the teacher and do all the orientation things, and then you get back in the groove again post Labor Day. So,
Well, I would kind of.
I like to look active under contract to pending, because it speaks a lot of how do we keep our contracts together. You know, active under contract means that first week. Pending means you got past due diligence. So I just like to look at the ratios. Are we becoming really great at keeping our contracts together, which I think will become a skill set needed, certainly in the next coming months. Inspections are always a highly emotional part of the contract. So we got to be really skill-based in that.
100%. You know, I like to think about this, like the number of sale signs in front yards has held constant. But the velocity of people taking those houses off the market certainly looks like it's slowed down a little bit, but we don't see it in closings yet. But closings obviously is a lag indicator where contracts are leading indicators. So the anticipation is this number will slow down, right?
Yes, but that's where our skills come in, not for us. Exactly. We don't want to lag for us.
All right. DeKalb County 515 looks like that inventory's held. Option contracts or under contract 64 down from 70, 80, maybe a little bit, not as drastic. Pendings, we were starting at 190, 200, went down into the 160s when the interest rates started to move, went back up, and then now we're back down. 144 is our low point. And then, of course, closings, you look back across 232, 200. We had the low point here. And we're actually up from where we were a month ago. So, like I said,
Similar.
I mean, I'm good on the closings right now, but all intelligent signs say there's a little bit of a slowdown coming. But the opportunity to go make the money is there if you can find the buyers, meaning there are sales signs and people with their hands straight up and down saying, I will sell my house for a good price if you bring somebody here.
And I think a line worth noting is that withdrawal line. Traditionally, you withdraw for several reasons. Sometimes you withdraw because you're like, you know what, it didn't work at my preferred sales price. I'm pulling it off the market. You know, you may have personal life reasons to withdraw. And then I think a lot of agents use the tactic of, you know what, I missed pricing the house. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull back the listing, withdraw it, relist so it looks like a brand new listing. Maybe you didn't have your condition looking good. Maybe you needed to paint. Maybe you needed to stage better. So I start looking at withdrawals to go, are we getting it right? Or is there opportunity to go find an expired or withdrawal listing? I would even say go look at expired rental listings because I see a handful of that happening too. So those people may want to become sellers. So that's a line just to watch for trend purposes.
Absolutely. Cobb County, 540 active inventory, same story. The inventory is holding. Option contract, we got to check this from last week. I still think that's an error. But 87 is a little bit of a slowdown from 194, 97, but not as drastic as some of the other counties. So maybe Cobb County is holding in the contract department a little better than some of the other counties. 208, 243, 182, we're at 174 this week. And then closings, obviously 271 was considerably higher, but if you look at the rest of these weeks, 208 is pretty consistent with where it's at.
And I would put Cobb County, with the exception of Braves country where the stadium is, it's technically all not Atlanta. You know, DeKalb, Fulton still has a lot of Atlanta in it, but Cobb County is definitely starting to be considered suburban, very much probably dictated by seasonality, school calendar. You can move into other counties and that's going to probably be a similar case. There's not as many, for those who are worried about school systems, not as handful of private schools, not as many as in town. So seasonality may be a factor you know, when you start looking outside of, you know, ICP.
Absolutely.
But the beautiful thing about, let me just say this, beautiful thing about it, why I think the under contracted pending stays strong is because that is traditionally a very strong area because people want to live in that area and for a multitude of reasons.
There you go. And then I'll just hit the other big county in our major metropolitan, Gwinnett. I see the inventory starting to really hurt in Gwinnett County. You're at 690. Yeah, it's one of the larger counties. The contracts are at 54, which is considerably down from where it was. The pendings are at 198, which is looks like that county's probably taking it a little harder than some of the others. But if you look at closings, 264 is not a bad number. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, I think the next 30 days will tell us a whole lot of information. But just to summarize the numbers, what I see is a whole lot of sellers still having signs in the yard with their hands up saying, let's go, bring me a good qualified buyer. I do see the buyer demand tapered down a little bit, but that doesn't mean that that's our reality. That just means that's the reality of the market. And then we go create our own reality from that.
Absolutely.
So can I add something?
Yeah, please.
So things not on here are, the average sales price or median sales price, days on market, and the number of competing offers. All of those seem to be moving in a trending direction towards less favorable for sellers. Average sales price in certain pockets has actually dropped, and some has still held its own for sure, which goes back to that. It's a micro, market experience for most of us, driven by local real estate agents. Days on market is starting to climb. And although under 30 days is still a remarkable statistic, it's been minutes and not days. And now some of our areas have crept up into the 20 to 30, day range. So it's a trend to consider. And then competing offers, from my sources are sharing that there are far fewer of those than there used to be. And people are, rolling back in with stipulations like, appraisal and contingency for inspection and some other things. So I'd say as a motivating conversation with a buyer, now's a really good time, because the odds are the interest rates don't go down right away. To go ahead and capitalize where we are, you can refinance later if the rates do change. But closed the deal with my son actually today, dusted off my lockbox key, and proud of them for buying their first house. But we were second, we were a backup offer. And the reasons the first offer fell through are honestly pretty trivial, which led me to believe there's a lot more going on psychologically in the minds of buyers and wanting, being afraid of maybe overpaying or being too aggressive in a trending market. So just some thoughts. And if the other thing is, if you add up the withdrawn and the expireds, you're still looking at 10 to 15, maybe 20% of the market. And so that means 80% win, 20 don't. And so, if you want to be in that top echelon in the winning formula, you better dust off your listing presentation and really refine and get good at staging and presenting and marketing. And these are skills that in the market we're moving towards really separate everyone as far as in the competitive arena.
Yeah. I was teaching a class last week in Decatur, and I asked everybody to raise their hand if they had just gotten into the real estate since the pandemic. And it was a good chunk of people in the room. And I said, my guess is you guys have never had a listing that lasted longer than 30 days. And they're going, yep. And I've said, just so you know, your seller's going to panic at 30 days. Get ready. Like, it's a whole different market than it was the last 2 years, right?
100%. You got to come up with some really good strategies that last beyond 30 days.
Get ready. All right. So here, I think this is really important to, I've probably said this before, but I think it's important to reiterate. We got to stop comparing this market to last year's market. Take 2020 and 2021 off the table. Like, they weren't normal. Our lives weren't normal. Buying habits, selling habits weren't normal. And the problem is the media, every time they quote a number, is saying compared to last year, compared to last month, and the problem is it's creating some negative stories. The truth is we really need to be comparing this market to 2019. And I do think 2019 was a great year. It wasn't astronomical like the last two, but I just think it's important that we understand this, but the consumers don't. And the consumers are reading the headlines, and all the news medias are comparing them on year-over-year numbers. And here's the statement: year-over-year numbers don't take into account the fact that the pandemic years were radical outliers on a number of levels, real estate being just one. And I think that's the whole story. You don't even have to read the article. You just got to understand that news media is comparing to 2021. It doesn't make sense. Any comments on that?
Yeah. So, Brett, we've changed our language around the past 2 years, and even interest rates along the past 2 years. We now call it the pandemic rate, or the pandemic interest rate, or the COVID interest rate, or the pandemic market versus traditional real estate market. And the reason we say it like that is because pandemics happen like once in a lifetime, and hopefully less than that, because we don't want harm to happen to people. So when it's a pandemic rate, it's like it's like once in a lifetime. You'll never see this again. The interest rates we just saw, we will likely never see it again in our lifetime. And certainly we want no pandemics happening in our lifetime. So we just pin it to that and just change our language around it so we can speak to, okay, like now traditional real estate and get it back to what does that actually look like?
Yep. I remember when I first started selling real estate, the interest rates were 7%. And it was really easy because at 7%, your payment's 1% of the mortgage rate. So it's like, oh, I'm going to finance 200,000. It's $2,000 a month. Life was good. And people were buying houses, right? And I sound old, just like I probably would make fun of anybody else saying the same thing. Yet it's important to draw on the past to understand how to navigate the future. And I reiterate, like gas prices, you know, everybody gets emotional and upset when gas prices go up, but then we all just pay them because we readjust our life. And interest rates are the same way. There's going to be an initial emotional reaction, but at some point in time, people are going to want to buy that house and they're just going to pay the interest rate and it'll be okay. This one,
mortgage interest is tax deductible. Make sure when you're consulting your clients, you sit down and really help them understand the net effect of making a higher payment. It's not as bad as it seems when, you know, a big chunk of that payment each month becomes a reduction in your taxable income.
Yeah. I probably would have to get past the October 15th tax bill before you could have that conversation.
Hey,
It's
Brett,
still a little raw there.
Only the wealthy wait till October 15th.
Don't go there. All right. Change of dialogue. And here's the truth. Predictions aren't guarantees. So here's, let's talk through this for a second. We've been on this call saying we honestly do not believe prices are going to go backwards. We've been saying that for a year. This article came out this week where it's saying Fannie Mae is now expecting home prices to go backwards next year by 1.5%. And I want to talk through this with you. I think that's probably true. And you have to understand that this is an average for the entire US. So that means there's going to be pockets of the US that home prices might go backwards 10%, 5%. And there's going to be pockets of the US where prices are still going to appreciate 5%, 10%. The question is what's happening in our local market. And do I think our prices are going to go backwards? I think our market's pretty strong. I wouldn't rule it out. I guarantee there's going to be some houses that are going to have to sell at a quote unquote decline from what it was worth a year ago, but I don't think it's going to be the norm. So really my question is, do you believe that, one? And two, how do we consult a buyer that thinks it's a bad time to buy because prices are going to go backwards?
Well, it doesn't really help.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, you know, a 1.5% decline in prices is not going to negate whatever interest rate hikes are coming down the line. I mean, the Fed has made it very clear we're expecting more interest rate hikes. So you might save 1.5% on the cost, but you don't know when rates are going to come back down. You're going to be locked in at a higher monthly payment for that same home. Doesn't really make sense to wait unless you know that an area is already in decline. Certain little pockets of Atlanta, maybe, but it's just not a safe bet that you're going to save money on the price when rates are continuing to climb.
Well, my favorite question of all time is how long do you intend to live in your house? And it's rarely a 2 or 3 year short-term investment horizon. If it's longer than 5 or 6, the odds are you jump through a couple of cycles, at least one. And real estate historically climbs over time.
Yep. And I think that's where you just, you give them that consultation, right? Like, hey, are you trying to sell this in the next 12 months? No, nobody buys a house with the intention of selling it in the next 12 months. Maybe 2 years, it'd be worthy of a conversation. But if they're buying a house to live in for 5-7 years, it's not a concern in the world right now.
Another point is if you were pinched, could you rent it out and get close to covering the overhead? If the answer is yes, then it's a really good investment and there's really no downside.
100%.
Well, and I think in the alternative, I'm just, everyone watching those stock portfolios, I think we're down like 30%, 20, 30% over the year. It's painful. It's up today, maybe,
Yeah.
but I'm in 100% agreement. 1.5% spread over, like, say, 5 years, 10 years. I think they say we're now at the average around 8 to 10 years in a home. That's considered pennies over that spread out across that time.
Yeah.
So I would lock in on the lower rate. We certainly know rent is not going down.
Well, here's the 10-year treasury, right? So the low point was August 1st. Actually, I think, yep, it was August 1st, and then it just continued to climb, right? And if I pull this graph out 3 years, you can see the drastic climb that the 10-year treasury is doing, which is the direct correlation basically to our interest rates, right? So yes, Audrey,
COVID rate. That was the COVID rate.
COVID rate, right? And I definitely agree that we haven't crested the mountain. It's still going up. Yet I don't think it's a cause for concern. I think it's really just a financial conversation and a financial consultation conversation with your people, which is not that hard to do, but it is a skill set that I think agents have to develop that they haven't had in their toolbox, or they put it on the shelf for the last couple of years. And it needs to come back off the shelf and dust it off like Rick's Supercard, or we're going to use training and coaching and consulting to really develop those skill sets.
Right on.
There you go.
Yeah.
The other thing,
skills you're after, you're in the right place. We've got a toolbox that's almost virtually never ending.
So this is the Fed's website. It's got Atlanta unemployment at 3.0 as of end of August. They lag in how they report it. So at the end of the day, we're still in incredible employment in Atlanta, Georgia. And people with jobs are making money, and they do want to spend money. So they make choices around where they spend their money from a consumption standpoint. And real estate's a big part of that. So I feel like our industry is pretty solid. It's the skill set we got to go develop to figure out how to win. That makes sense. And the analogy I'm using with people right now is ducks on a pond. And if you look at a duck above the water, they are calm, cool, poised, and collected. But below the water, their feet are moving at 100 miles an hour. And that's how we've got to be as agents right now, is calm, cool, collected persona with activities going as fast as we can, and we'll be able to navigate and find our success. Anything else on that, guys? All right.
People are still moving here.
Oh, yeah.
Companies are still moving here.
Yep.
So this is the big debate. Now, I realize today's articles all have a little bit of a negative connotation to it, but our commitment is to have real talk with you guys here and not necessarily fluff it, because I think that's how we become smarter, better, trained, and go find our path to winning. However, the big debate is, are we seeing seasonality right now, or are we actually seeing a significant shift? What do you think?
Both.
Yeah.
That would be my professional opinion. It's both.
I agree.
The question is
I agree totally on point. I think it's both.
Yeah, it depends. And the only way we'll know the magnitude of the shift is when we compare it quarter over quarter. And to your point, COVID is that's an abnormal comparison. And the situational realities painted a different economic landscape. And now we're kind of paying for it, and we're pulling through. So we won't know honestly until next quarter. And that's the hard part in comparative analysis around the industry, is you have to have a benchmark to confirm good versus okay versus bad.
100%. So how do you win? One, you get your feet moving as fast as you can. Two, you educate yourself as much as you can. And three, you develop that skill set around scripts, dialogues, objection handling, positioning. Like I haven't heard the COVID rate before, and I think that's a killer phrase, right? Or that was a COVID market or a pandemic market. So it separates it. I think that's genius, and that's a script, right? That's an objection handler that allows you to use in conversation to move people across the finish line.
I think it's a brilliant
And that's
strategy listings right now, for getting sellers to understand, hey, we are really truly coming out of the pandemic market. And the sellers who are going to win right now are those who are reading the room and giving the market what it's asking for, which is a good price and good condition. You can't throw junk up on the MLS. Like I am shocked when I see still coming with iPhone photos with a finger in them. I'm like, how people think they're going to sell this home? So I think that I really like that whole COVID market, pandemic market. I think it's such a smart way to frame conversations, not just with buyers, but with sellers as well.
There you go.
Mhm.
Any questions on what we covered today? Any comments?
And Brad, I'll let them, if they have a question, they can certainly jump in. If not, I would love to just share my observation. What we pulled up on team meeting last week is about price reductions. So I'll let them ask questions. If not, I can continue that direction.
Go.
So am I in the place where I'm allowed to share it? Let's see, share screen, done. So I found it just very interesting because I'm just a market nerd, like to study. And so I did a little, let me do a slideshow. So I can't find it with all these little things up on top. It really doesn't matter. But anyway, I just did, it doesn't matter what you read the addresses. 30092, that's Peachtree Corner, Simpson Elementary, Gwinnett County, really desirable area, suburban area. So I wanted to compare both Gwinnett, Cobb, and in town. So nice areas. Look at all those price reductions. I don't know what percentage that is, but that to me looks like, 80%, therefore, under $1 million. This is as active. Moving to the next slide, 30080, that's Smyrna. Cobb County, right around the Smyrna Market Village, very desirable. A couple really great schools in there as well. Again, look, price reductions. What is that? About 80% of the listings had a price reduction.
Yeah.
300342. That's inside the perimeter of Sandy Springs and a little bit tad outside perimeter. Kind of hovers. The Sarah Smith Elementary kind of hovers a little bit towards Chastain Park. Again, look at all that price reduction going on there. Now, again, average price is like you find very little in the 5s. You find them a lot 7, 8, 9. So that's kind of the average price there. But then when I went to over $1 million, now this again, I should probably cap it at 2.5 because that's a different market versus the 9.9, which is above. But I looked at pendings versus that. Opportunity will probably happen in the future in the higher end because it always lags a little because they can hold out longer. But I looked at this going, if I'm making an offer in this zip code, I'm as a buyer's agent should be enjoying their life right now because they can go find quite a bit of homes. They can actually negotiate and you don't have that conversation. I still heard of a multiple offer scenario this past weekend. And with that said, they still happen, like they happen in any market. But this is opportunity for anybody who is scared of overpaying. You can probably come in. The sellers are already warmed up to negotiate. And I'm seeing this happening from a buyer's agent perspective, opportunity from a listing agent's perspective. If you price it right, you won't see this happen. And that should be, take a slide like this, use it to talk to your sellers about, don't say, make sure the language is about pricing it correctly, not below the market, above the market, any of that. Just say pricing it correctly so you don't experience this. And with that said, depending upon how long they sit, it'll decide, do we start to see expired, withdrawals, whatever, especially as we move into the end of the year, holiday season, beginning of the new year. If I was a buyer's agent, I would call every client I know right now saying, go buy before interest rates climb again. You can go make an offer, you can negotiate, you can get your repairs taken care of, and we're not paying full price. Or if we pay full price, we're paying full price at the reduced price. And but I just found, I don't know, I find it interesting. I'm just seeing a lot more price reductions. So it goes back to people have never had to be skilled at pricing homes the first time and pricing correctly. So that's our opportunity as agents to learn.
There you go. And that seller's going to start panicking at some point. And that's a whole nother skill set.
And I feel, and I'll just say one thing. I hope there's things I hope we keep about the pandemic, and there's homes I think there's things I hope we get back to how we used to be, like our customer service, our best practices. I hope we get back to what we were in 2019, where we actually touched our database more and things like that, because the pace is slowing. However, things I hope we keep from the pandemic: fully underwritten buyers before you take them out. Things we don't need to have a 10-day due diligence anymore, a 14-day due diligence. Like we've proven we got it done in 3 days. Perhaps keep it 5 days, 7 days. I actually feel, because of the intensity of the past few years, that sellers would have been okay holding on their listing for 2-3 weeks. They literally are panicking after the first weekend. So you can take it as a buyer's agent, take that opportunity to see the following weekend if it's not sold. Go in, make your offer. They'll probably take it. They don't have the patience like we did in 2019.
Yep. They're still in the emotional phase. It takes
Correct.
a while to get through the emotional phase back to logic. So thank you for sharing that, Kelly. All right, guys.
Absolutely.
There's your Monday industry update. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Be good, everybody.
Thanks, Kelly.